Welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really complex and frankly often unsettling part of our information world. We've got a huge stack of sources to get through today, all focused on a public figure who generates a lot of conversation. Candace Owens.
Yeah.
You've sent us articles, research papers, videos, really exploring her journey, her specific claims, and importantly, her communication style.
And what's really, I think, compelling here is looking at how her public story, her narrative arc, seems to have swung, almost from one political pole to the other.
Right.
And this path, it intertwines with some of the most persistent and, let's be honest, often damaging conspiracy theories we see floating around. So our mission today, like always, is to pull out the most crucial bits of knowledge, the key insights from all these sources you've sent.
Yeah, the goal is for you to walk away well-informed, not just about what she's saying, but critically how she's saying it and why any of this actually matters.
Exactly, why it matters in the bigger picture.
Okay, so let's unpack this first part. Our sources lay out this really fascinating, almost jarring shift in her public image and political alignment.
Oh, indeed. It's pretty striking when you look at it. We learn that, before she became this prominent conservative voice, she actually launched a website. It was called socialautopsy.com.
Social autopsy.
Yeah, and its stated aim, according to the sources, was to, quote, dox and expose right-wing people.
Wow. Doxing right-wing people.
Yes. And it apparently even went as far as encouraging retaliatory harassment against Gamergate people. Gamergate itself was, often linked to online harassment campaigns back then.
Right, I remember that. So that's a huge contrast to her later work, isn't it? Like working at the Daily Wire.
Absolutely.
And then eventually becoming really critical of figures like Donald Trump, specifically over what she saw as ties to Jewish influence. What do the sources say this massive shift suggests? Is it her beliefs changing or something else?
Well, the sources lean towards suggesting it's maybe less about a simple political evolution and more about a kind of strategic tendency they call audience capture.
Audience capture.
Yeah, the idea being you find a particular crowd and that you tell them exactly what they already want to hear. Sometimes the sources suggest, maybe just for the sake of stirring things up, generating controversy.
So finding your niche and leaning into it hard.
Exactly. It really highlights how powerful it can be to prioritize getting that affirmation from a specific group, maybe over sticking strictly to factual accuracy. You build a following by reflecting their beliefs back at them.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting, and I have to say pretty alarming based on. They detail a whole range of really controversial claims attributed to Candace Owens, claims often presented as if they're just facts.
Yes.
What are some of the more, let's say, unique historical interpretations that the sources bring up?
Well, and this brings up that crucial question, right? When does just asking questions tip over into, outright misinformation?
Right.
The sources highlight claims that seem to profoundly distort historical events and even basic scientific understanding. For instance, her commentary apparently ranges from casting doubt on the Holocaust.
On the Holocaust itself.
Yeah, suggesting the stories sound completely absurd or that they might be, quote, bizarre propaganda that Jews are utilizing to manipulate the narrative.
Wow. Okay, that's...
It is. And then the sources say it gets even more specific and, frankly, quite fantastical.
So?
Claims like Jewish people created dinosaurs to trick Christians.
Created dinosaurs.
Yes. Or even that they invented outer space.
Invented outer space.
Okay. And another particularly jarring historical distortion mentioned is the claim that Stalin was Jewish.
Stalin?
Yeah, and that the Bolshevik Revolution was actually, quote, a Jewish war to kill Christians.
Stalin wasn't Jewish. He persecuted Jewish people.
Exactly. The sources explicitly state Stalin was not Jewish and, in fact, killed many, many Jews, particularly during his purges. So it shows this pattern of sort of pinning blame for huge historical atrocities onto one specific group.
That historical context is so important for understanding these claims, and it seems to lead into another area where these themes pop up a lot in the source. Her comments on U.S. foreign policy.
Yes, definitely.
What patterns do the sources identify there?
Well, a really significant pattern emerges where various events, often negative ones, are linked back to Israel or Jewish people.
Like what?
For example, there's the assertion that Israel killed JFK.
Israel killed Kennedy. But how?
Well, the sources point out it's demonstrably false just on a basic factual level. Jordan controlled Jerusalem in 1963, not Israel. So the logistics don't even begin to make sense.
Right.
She's also connected, according to the sources, to the dancing Israelis narrative around 9/11.
That old conspiracy theory.
And the broader Greater Israel conspiracy theory, this idea that Israel secretly wants to take over the entire Middle East. One source just flat out calls that crazy, insane, unhinged.
And beyond these specific events, the sources talk about wider claims of influence too, right?
Oh, absolutely. She allegedly states things like, the U.S. is a colony of Israel.
A colony.
Yes, and that its foreign policy is essentially dictated by Israel. There's even mention of her implying some kind of Jewish science of blackmail used for global control. It's a very consistent theme that runs through the materials we were...
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to public health. How do the sources describe her take on, say, autism or figures like Robert F. Kennedy?
Yeah, this is another interesting area. The sources detail her claim that RFK Jr. is actually being blackmailed by Jews.
Blacked?
Yes, and controlled by Israel, with the goal being to vaccinate people with poisons to turn Americans autistic.
That's quite a specific accusation, especially given RFK Jr.'s own stance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's presented this way despite RFK Jr.'s, publicly stated goal, which is more about researching everything food, water, air, parenting styles to figure out autism causes, rather than just immediately blaming vaccines or pharma companies.
So it's like taking his general skepticism and twisting it
into a very specific conspiratorial narrative involving Israel and blackmail.
Yeah,
that's how the sources frame it.
And sticking with science for a moment, the sources also detail her skepticism about some really fundamental things, like the shape of the Earth, the moon landing.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs.
Yes, it's quite broad. She apparently states she's not a flat earther, but also not a round earther.
Not neither.
Right. She says she's left the cult of science, calling it a pagan faith. And there's this anecdote where she reportedly sent producers down to Antarctica to research if the Earth is flat.
Seriously, what happened?
Well, apparently the conclusion was, quote, nope, the Earth is not in fact flat.
Huh, okay.
And then there's the dinosaur thing. She's quoted as saying she's never believed in dinosaurs.
Never believed, like fossils.
Apparently linking them to a Christ conspiracy and asserting they were, again, quote, invented by Jews to make you stop believing in Jesus.
Wow.
So it reveals this pattern, right? Rejecting established scientific fact when it seems to clash with a particular belief system, often, again, with this recurring anti-Semitic undertone, according to the sources.
Okay, so beyond just the sheer number and the nature of these claims, our sources also try to peel back the layers on how these narratives get constructed and delivered.
Right, the rhetorical strategy.
Exactly, and they point to some really striking inconsistencies in our approach. What did the analysis of her communication style find?
Well, what's fascinating here is how she reportedly uses these subtle language tools. The sources call them discourse markers.
Like what?
Like dropping in words such as actually or by the way. They aren't just, filler words. The analysis suggests they're often used strategically, maybe to inject a sense of having some special insight, or to subtly brush off an opposing view. It lets her pivot the conversation without a direct clash, maintaining this air of authority.
And when she is pressed on some of these controversial topics, she seems to have a go-to strategy.
Precisely. When she's pushed, say, on a strong word like genocide, she reportedly tends to avoid defining it directly.
Oh, what is she doing?
She might pivot, bring up unrelated historical events, maybe to kind of dilute the meaning of the term, like saying, well, what happened with Native Americans was a genocide. It shifts the focus.
I see. And there's also the use of emotion.
Yes. Frequently using emotionally charged language, focusing on things like the deaths of Palestinian children, for example. The sources suggest this plays on empathy, steering the conversation away from a purely fact-based debate.
And then sometimes God gets brought into it.
Yes, that's noted too. Using faith, as the sources put it, as a way to back up her points and present herself as morally superior.
Invoking a higher power.
Essentially introducing an unquestionable authority, yeah. It suggests maybe leaning on divine backing when perhaps a solid, logical, or factual basis isn't readily available.
So if someone communicates this way, especially with a large platform, what does that mean for, accountability? How does she handle being challenged?
Well, the sources suggest she tends to play the victim card when she's challenged directly.
How so?
Accusing interviewers of interrupting her or not letting her finish her thought. It's a tactic that can effectively deflect attention away from maybe a lack of evidence for her claims.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, there's one instance cited with Piers Morgan. He offered her a $100,000 bet, a public bet, that Brigitte Macron, the French president's wife, was born female, challenging a conspiracy theory Owens had promoted.
Okay, a direct challenge. How did she respond?
Instead of addressing the bet or the core claim, she reportedly pivoted immediately to talking about the Trump trials.
The Trump trials, how is that related?
It isn't. directly. But by bringing them up, she suggested that legal systems themselves are inherently unreliable, thereby casting doubt on any form of official verification rather than engaging with the specific point Morgan was making.
And beyond the rhetoric, the sources point to some pretty major contradiction between her public stances and her relationships or action, highlighting a kind of fascinating selectivity in applying her principles.
Yes. This part is quite striking.
Let's talk about Andrew Tate.
Right. So despite her being very outspoken against pornography, calling it harmful and exploitative.
Which is a strong stand.
Very strong. But the sources show she has also been a vocal defender of Andrew Tate.
The same Andrew Tate who basically built his career and fortune in that very
The very same. Who, as the sources note, openly bragged about exploiting men through pornography.
That seems like a direct contradiction.
It does. And it's further complicated, the sources say, because her husband, George Farmer, apparently has a long-standing relationship with Tate. And compounding this, there are reports detailed in the sources where she allegedly protected the identity of a convicted felon who was involved in a previous case against one of Tate's accusers.
Protected the felon.
While at the same time repeatedly naming the accuser, who was reportedly a minor at the time of the alleged incident.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to unpack there. And the sources also highlight a, let's say, complex relationship with Kanye West, now known as Ye.
Yes.